In one of the previous videos I made, I talked about how to set up such motor in the analog speed mode. To drive this motor that way, we just use 0 to 10 volts and it spins with a speed proportional to the voltage we apply. But in some cases, people need their spindle to be indexable. This means that you want to precisely control the angular position of the spindle shaft. For example, I'd like to have the possibility to rotate my part in the rotating chuck to the right position and then make some work on it in the angular position I just said before. And most of the Chinese servo motors have in their drivers the possibility to switch between the speed mode and the positioning mode. It is done just by one digital input. This CN1 port is used mostly for exchanging informations between the computer and the servo driver. Here are the two cables that I added to have more digital inputs, and both of them will be relevant for our work today. And here is the cable which was soldered by the factory. There are some digital inputs, outputs, and also the pulse control wires which will be used today. Here is the mess I made recently. Here are the devices I connected to the UC300ETH controller. More details are available in a previous video. Here are two switches which are connected to the digital inputs of the servo driver here through these cables. The question is, do you need such switches to switch between speed and position mode? Actually yes and no. Yes, because you have to supply that signal to the servo driver, but on the other hand, you could replace such switch with a relay which could be controlled with your CNC controller with maybe a macro, and that way probably you should be able to control that automatically with your computer. This is how the wiring looks like apart of the power supply. Please refer to the previous videos about the basics. UCCNC controller connected to the breakout board. Servo driver step and direction inputs connected to the step and direction outputs. Servo driver encoder Z signal to one of the CNC controller inputs for homing purposes. Servo driver power supply and motor connection. Also, speed mode connections are needed with the 0 to 10 volt signal. Please check my video about utilizing a servo as a spindle drive. And the digital inputs of the servo driver to supply the change mode signal. Connecting here the step and direction signals to the BOB. I'm setting here the parameters needed additionally apart from the parameters set in the video about servo spindle setup. So everything is wired up, all the parameters are set, and we are ready to go. So the idea is that this switch is connected to the digital input number 5 of the servo driver, which is the C mode function, and the principle here is that when we press this button we get into the speed mode, and when it's not pressed the spindle motor is in the positioning mode. So when it's not pressed it acts just like a axis of the machine, and when it is pressed it behaves like a spindle should behave. So you just put the right number of the RPM and it spins in the speed that you need. In the previous video I made, it worked in speed mode, so I will show you how it works in the speed mode. I set the speed to 500 RPM. I turned on the spindle clockwise command, which is M3, and now when I press the button, the servo motor will get into the speed mode. It has to be powered up to work. So okay, everything's ready, and it spins. 500 RPM, as we said, on the CNC controller. Now it gets into the positioning mode, speed mode, positioning mode, speed mode, positioning mode. Okay, now let's try how the positioning mode works. In order to test it, we are going to the MPG. Here we click C-axis, which is our indexable axis of the spindle. The jog feed is 100%. The maximum speed was set at 100 RPM. So when I jog with the C-axis, the spindle motor should turn at exact 100 RPM. Yep, that's happening. We can set it to step work. Okay, we can set a half rotation. One more. Now the unit is rotations, but you can divide everything by 360 and you will get degrees, angular position in degrees. And the fast homing configuration. Spindle C-axis has to be added to the homing sequence. Also the homing speeds has to be set in angular degrees per minute. So summarizing, is it possible to use this servo in a positioning and speed mode? Sure. Can you use the Z signal of the encoder to use it as a home position input? Sure. So if my video helped you, thumbs up. If you don't subscribe, please do it. And see you next time.